It is the global norm, and it has become more of the global norm over the last couple of years. A report this week coming out of Jamaica from their police service on the number of deaths of despair, the number of deaths by suicide, the number of people taking their own lives, and it's a number that is too high, obviously. One is too high when we're considering things like that, but something that is curious about the number, something that's curious about that number across the entire world, is that when you look at it, you're seeing that the number of men taking their own lives is astronomically higher than women. It isn't just barely any difference. It's such a difference that it is alarming, and it is something that is serious consideration for worry if you're thinking on a larger social scheme and on a larger social sense. The number of men that are taking their own lives is a problem. And what is causing this? The possible reasons for this is an interesting thing to attempt to study, because whatever is the reason that is causing it to be that more men take their lives than women, it's a reason that is seen across the world, because this is a pattern, this is a tendency, a trend that you see when you analyze these numbers just about everywhere. And strangely enough, it seems as though the difference in men to women, male to female, increases and widens the gap in some of the countries with more wealth. You'd think that as people get wealthier, as they get more resources, that they would be more satisfied with life, that they would be more content with life. That is obviously not correct. By now, we have seen enough in this world. We have seen enough wealthy people. We have seen enough people gain so much resources that they were able to satisfy all of their general human needs. And it still didn't satisfy whatever the need is that solves for people not taking their own lives and people being satisfied with the life they're living on this planet. Over 1,000 suicides in 19 years. Police say 844 men, 164 women ended their lives during the period. More men have committed suicide than women since 2000, data recorded by the Jamaica Constabulary Force have revealed. Between 2000 and 2019, 1,008 cases of suicide have been reported, with men accounting for 84% of that figure. This translates to 844 men whose deaths have been by suicide. Senior communications strategist for the JCF, Dennis Brooks, told the Jamaica Observer, in contrast to 164 women. The figure for 2020, during which the country saw the emergence and rapid spread of the novel coronavirus, has not yet been tallied. He said although it is not expected to be quite different, except for the year 2008 when more women reportedly committed suicide than men, 6, the latter group has steadily recorded higher cases each year. To note also, as they said, the figures for the year 2020 have not been tallied yet. If we were to extrapolate and take figures from other regions and see things that we're seeing other parts of the world and try to put them across to the Caribbean and to Jamaica by extension, to see possibly what may be happening in 2020, when you look at figures across the world, most places saw an increase in the amount of deaths by suicide and by people taking their own lives. The number of deaths by despair increased in the year 2020. For obvious reasons. Lots of people lost their jobs, and lots of the deaths even increased in the already vulnerable group of males, of men, because many men lost their jobs. And it's already seen, this is something that is already noted all around the world. It's something that is said by many psychologists. Many men often reach that point where they see themselves as having no other hope, when they have no other purpose, or when they see themselves as having no useful purpose on the earth. And many men's purposes are very tightly linked to their jobs. And if you have these men out of jobs, out of work for a year, you're risking a lot. Already in an at-risk group. 84% leaning towards men I think that is enough of a disparity to call men the at-risk group when we're talking about these things. The only year they reported with less cases than 30 was the year 2004. More than 30 cases of suicide have been recorded for every other year, the data requested by the Sunday Observer showed. Counseling psychologist Andre Allen Cassie, in an interview with Sunday Observer, suggested that men are more likely to commit suicide than women because of how they have been nurtured. There are 3 P's that are prevalent in males: the need to provide, the need to protect, and to prove their power. So provide, protect, and power. So if any of these 3 are taken away from them, then as far as their value and worth are concerned, it becomes diminished. Once that has become diminished, then to a large extent, what we have seen is the questioning of one's existence. Why do I need to live? I can't provide, I can't protect, I don't have the power or means to ensure that these things occur, said Allen Cassie of Family Life Ministries. And that's an interesting thing he noted, because I remember reading from another psychologist, and they were speaking about one of the things that makes the differences between males and females. I am of the view, I know it seems to be a contentious view in modern times, but I am of the view that males and females are different. I don't know if you think otherwise, but I think that seems to be a pretty obvious observation. And one of the key differences between males and females, if we're talking biologically wise here, my main learning was in biology. I like the subject, I like the sciences, and I do enjoy some biology. So if we're talking biologically, one of the main differences between men and women in terms of their biological function, I'm speaking their biological function here, the niche they fit in the scheme of our entire species. The purpose, the biological purpose of a woman is known from the time she is born. And if it isn't known then, it is reminded from the time she reaches puberty. Women have their biological purpose already clearly outlined. You're here to propagate the species, and each one of you is generally capable of doing this. The male's biological purpose isn't that precise, because one man is capable of doing a lot of that part of the biological process. There aren't many men needed for that. So one of the main parts of a man's biological purpose is being able to provide for a woman, provide for the female during this time when she would be less able to provide for herself, and after that time to provide for both of them. So the idea of provision from men isn't something that is sexist or something that is so strange. And how could we possibly think that men must be providers? Well, because the women go through a specific time when they would be less able to provide for themselves, and then they create a little tiny one of us that is totally incapable of providing for themselves. So during that time, the man is the provider. That's obvious. So if a man now is seen as incapable of providing for a woman or for the offspring, you could see why his idea of what is his purpose could become a more questionable thing. And if you lose an idea of what your purpose is, your reason for living kind of goes. That's the idea behind purpose. Purpose is, why am I here? What is my purpose for being here? And if you can't find that, well, you could find yourself in a really struggling position. He said for most men, the limited ability to call on their inner self-regulating resources or to rely on intrinsic reward pushes them to lash out with unhealthy bids for power and dominance through violence and vengeance. So in other words, men are a lot more prone to exercise risky, violent behaviors because of the sensitivity of their rejection. So if you feel overwhelmed by a rejection, for example, your partner you have been with for years cheated on you, that's the sensitivity of rejection. There are some rejection in which the sensitivity is low, but if the sensitivity to some rejection is high, plus cultural norms, then the result is to do something violent either to the person or yourself, he explained. On the other hand, he said that women are better able to cope with or handle stress, and that this may account for the low figures being reported. Males tend to take rejection as a challenge to their masculinity. Women now are likely to feel emotionally hurt by rejection and to assume that there's something lacking in them. So they can become self-soothing to get over the insult rather than lashing out as males might do. Women are encouraged to get over it, but men often feel that they need to get even, and that again comes back to our cultural male norms. That's an interesting perspective. I could take that oftentimes men in our cultures have the belief that they more need to get even, while many women are more often taught and encouraged to get over it. Now, that's an interesting observation, and I'm sure it has its merits. And he's a professional counseling psychologist, so we take his word at his word. But an interesting part in that, when it comes to actual data and facts that have been recorded, is that I'm not sure what the figures are in Jamaica, but generally speaking, the world over, it is widely known that women attempt suicide more than men. When you're looking at actual cases of self-harm that do not lead to actual death, women are oftentimes far ahead of men in it. So if it is that women are better able to self-soothe and calm themselves down, then why would there be an increase in their demographic in the attempted suicides? That's an interesting observation. I'm not sure totally the reasons why. There have been different suggestions. One possible suggestion is that men, as he said here, as the psychologist rightfully said, men are generally more violent. In all cases, men have a higher tendency to violence. So when men do something, they are more violent and they are stronger. So when men do something, they do it with a higher degree of violence. So if a woman were to attempt to take her own life, she may attempt less violent methods, and oftentimes some of these less violent methods are less successful. I don't know if it's called that successful, especially when we're talking about what we're talking about, but you understand what I mean. And on the male side, they are generally more violent. So if a man is going to attempt it, he takes up something pretty conclusive that is going to pretty surely end the matter. And that's what he does. So men are generally more successful at it. I once saw a very dark bit of humor, that pointed out that men are even better at that than women. Now, it's humor. It's very dark humor also. But it is true too. Men are more successful at that, it seems, which is an unfortunate thing. Another possible reason also is that some theorize, I've seen this theorized, this isn't my theory here, I'm not sure, as I said before. I prefer to attempt to listen to as many theories as I can and try to see what makes sense out of all of these. I've seen it said, possibly, that part of the reason is that women in their socializing, women are more social creatures than men, more interpersonal. And the nature of their socializing is one that allows them to use this as a cry for help in some cases. So they don't go all the way because it's intended as a method of accruing attention to whatever they're suffering with. Maybe it is that men don't do such things and men just go all the way one time. So, right, coming down to the end of the article here, they quoted some statistics from the WHO that prove the point that what I spoke about earlier. On the global scale, it is seen that this is more the rule than the exception, with men taking their lives in a way higher rate than women. The organization WHO said globally in 2019, the age standardized suicide rate was 2 times higher in men than in women. Men to women suicide ratios greater than 1 indicated that suicide ratios were higher in men than in women, while the ratio was a little over 3 in high-income countries and was lower in low and middle-income countries. So, as I said, people are taking their lives at a higher rate in high-income countries. So, if you're looking at that reasoning, at that bit of information and data, it becomes kind of obvious that it isn't just about lack of resources. Whatever is causing so many people, and so many men in particular, to take their own lives and to resort to this method of solving their problems, it isn't just a matter of them not having enough resources, because people who have more resources are doing it at a higher rate. It's obvious now, and I think part of the problem in and of itself is that in the West, in much of the wealthier countries, being that Trinidad, when you're looking in the Caribbean, Trinidad is possibly the wealthiest country. So and I'm not sure, but I believe I saw an article years ago that pointed out, I think, you can double check this for me and someone fact check this if you know the information, but I think it was Guyana first and then Trinidad when we're looking at the suicide rates in the Caribbean as a whole. I'm not sure. You can fact check me on this. And that would add up because the wealthier countries are seeing a higher level. I think that part of it has to do with how we look at wealth in the West in the first place. Because of the nature of how our system is built around acquiring and gaining wealth and working for most of your life and trying to gain as much material things as possible, the assumption comes that getting these things is what is going to give you this fulfilling life. And I think that assumption is wrong. And many people are finding this out for themselves. And ultimately, if you cannot find what else is there to actually make your life fulfilling and actually give you a purpose and make this entire thing worth it, then the options out start to look more and more tempting. Don't forget to drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me why you think we're seeing that the cases of deaths by despair and depression in general are on such an increase during a time in the world when we have so much more resources than we ever did. Shouldn't that have made us happier, at least from how some of us think about life? Share this video to those that may like this content, and I'll see you tomorrow again.
Can you feel the music? Feel the music rising with the time.